Ladies and gentlemen, Nerdy Girl, how are you all doing? It's Tuesday, January 29th, 2019, and I'm coming in again, all the way from Rockford. Oh, it is time for our monthly meeting of the Engineering and Recording Society. So, everybody in YouTube land, enjoy. Here we are at 1811 Music Direct. Arrived. It's cold.
So that was like an episode where they used this Photoshop. And then what did they do? They used two speeds.
It's going to be 27 degrees below zero. We're going to tie or break a record. Now you know why I call it Burn Freeze, Illinois. You got an incoming call.
You do? Oh, you do?
You know how many doors over that?
Hi, Professor. Talk to me.
All of the setups and demonstrations that he has set for us today. You're listening to a comparison of Marvin Gaye's album, the new press by
and the original press as it originally came out, and you can hear the difference, but the main thing is showing one, not just the difference what Mobile Fidelity is. Mobile Fidelity has developed two new processes for this release. One of the things is that we're using a new vinyl formula. It's 3 times more expensive than any other vinyl formula. It's so pure you can see a bit through the record itself, so it's translucent. Wow. It's quieter and it is more durable. The other thing that's important in terms of both cost and fidelity is that the actual plating process, which we've used for a while, instead of being a 3-step process, is 1 step. But we're cryogenically treating the master, and that allows us to print like 700 or so extra copies. And since these are limited
condition of the plating.
Right. So and it is also seems to be more accurate as well. And since we're doing limited editions, if we can produce fewer physical masters, it's much more cost effective. The consumer is paying for that because this edition does cost $125. Retail. Yeah, there's no discounting this.
Never heard of that word. You don't even know what to say.
So, and it's and we did sell out our entire run in advance, and we did hit Billboard's top physical sales charts this week. And even though this is a big company, 18 if we've been able to physically ship them all in the same week. I think we can order further down, but we did all right. So, but for a reissue label to do that, it's interesting. And also, at the same time, Motown is still selling their original version at the because right now, I've never seen this before, there are 2 different mastering jobs on the charts at the same time. So, ours did better this week.
What's the relationship between MoFi and Music Direct?
Can we do it?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, MoFi,
Did you guys buy them?
Before it was, MoFi was acquired by Music Direct in late 1989, early 2000, out of bankruptcy.
Oh, wow, okay.
The backstory there was that MoFi had a distributor, ironically based here in Illinois. That distributor went belly up, and in doing so set the trend for financial worry with MoFi under its then ownership. Music Direct owner and president Jim Davis saw an opportunity for that, acquired the assets of the facility and the business as a whole and the intellectual property related to it. We obviously could not reissue any titles that were acquired prior to our ownership, so we couldn't reissue things like Pink Floyd and the usual stuff that most of the collectible audience was going gung-ho about. But we also took the liberty of doing a full refurbishment and updating of the original studios in Sebastopol, California to its current technological state. And since 2000, when one of our earliest releases was Hot Buttered Soul by Isaac Hayes, to its present runs, including the CBS Rhino Library of Elvis Costello and many others, the label has really taken a new life of its own under that stewardship. The team over there, including Michael Grantham, John Wood, two great engineers with Rob Laverty and Sean Britton, as well as others like Craig Winderlich, did I say his name right? And others were responsible for a lot of the success stories behind it. A lot of the innovations, including reissuing titles in 45 RPM, and of course the conversation that we're having tonight about One Step is just another example of that label's continuing story.
And do you guys do your in-house mastering out there at that studio?
Yeah.
Yes.
And who are your guys?
Well, Sean Britton.
Sean Britton and Rob Laverty are two.
I do know the Britton name. I don't know any of those.
Rob
other
Laverty
guys.
was over at Sony. Sean Britton is the longest serving member of MoFi's overall family, having been there since 1989, 1990 roughly, when he first joined.
I think the brand is very valuable because it's always been very quality oriented, no matter who it was run by, and so that's your main asset, I think.
Well, when you consider the legacy of the label with Stan Ricker and others in its day, and some of the innovations that it was doing, including the Anadisc 200s, which was, I think, an industry-leading.
You guys are
concept.
way over my head. I don't know any of those terms. What I do know is that you guys were people who took the master tape and did it from that, and made sure you had the right version to make your records from, instead of an equalized copy of the copy of the copy. And so this is what people who are, I'm not an audiophile, nor I am a hi-fi freak, but I'm not an audiophile. But I'm just saying that name is a very good name, and I'm not surprised you guys continue to innovate.
One thing I'll say about refurbishing the studio to some degree, because it was an excellent studio, but one of the things we really did was invest heavily in cabling, including power cords, to bring everything up to spec. That was one of the big innovations that we did as far as bringing everything up.
Which brings us to why my friend Grant Samuelson from Shinyata is here. Grant is here to do some demonstrations to give you a little bit of a bird's eye view of what we as retailers and subsequently end users and people in his side of the coin, including professional, medical, and otherwise, rely on products like Shinyata cables and filters to do what it is that they do best. So he'll definitely do some of those demonstrations. But just to kind of sort of turn circle, number one, on behalf of all of us at Music Direct, we're so very happy to have you here. It's great to see a group of individuals whose responsibility is to really make sure that what we hear is because of your work, and that those end users, our listeners, our customers who have systems and equipment as a result of what we do are able to enjoy it in that manner. So again, nice of you to be here. I'm going to turn it back over to you guys, Rob.
And this is Bess Navarro.
Oh,
Brand
hi.
ambassador. Brand ambassador.
Every
for
other
Music Direct.
Sunday morning on 90.9
Yeah.
FM, WGCB.
I've been with the company since 1995. My career started in sales for companies like Pacific Stereo and the like. So,
Oh, I remember Pacific
there we
Stereo.
go. That's why I have gray hair. But seriously though, I invite anybody here who, for any reason, if you visit our website, if you take home a catalog this evening, or if you need one of my business cards, if for any reason you're interested in such a, like a product like a Shinyata cable or a new release of a title, just because, well, you got to have it, let me know, because we'll obviously accommodate you with better pricing than what you see on sheet. We have a deal for typical VIP stuff, especially if they're referrals from this guy, and it's always a pleasure to take care of each and every one of you. And as Dave intimated, my other life is that I've been a radio host for WDCB for 21 years, doing Sunday Jazz and other slots. voice work. I'm a graduate of Columbia College Chicago, so I majored in media management, so I understand the ins and outs of what you guys must go through. So,
And,
Yes.
and as a pre-introduction, I'll introduce Dave Freeman.
Hi.
So Dave Freeman is a former comrade from back in the Triad WXFM days.
All the way back.
Back
333
and,
North Michigan Avenue on the 34th floor.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And he is one of my mentors,
Oh my God.
having met him during his days at WXFM, and then later at a chance meeting at WDCB when he was doing his shifts there, and I was just getting my feet wet. So
And now he's my audiophile mentor.
yeah, so
Funny how things work.
I coach him on the
jeez.
life of audio as well.
And Dave is also was at Green Dolphin Street and recorded many of those shows,
And-
some of which will be released.
Yes,
this
this
year.
year. That's why I'm taking time off to dot the I's and cross the T's, but I've been very fortunate. I started in radio in 1978, and back then, one person owned a radio station, and there was opportunities for young hustlers like me to come in, and I had my own show 5 nights a week for 6 years. I worked with some of the greatest legends in radio like Daddy O'Daly, Dick Buckley, Herb Kent, E. Rodney Jones, Purvis Spann, your all-day, all-night blues man working on here for a little while. And I just did a show called Night Jazz, and I had the great pleasure of playing whatever I wanted for 6 years in a row. And
WXFM.
it was my way or the highway, a lot of time on the highway, wound up back on the air at WNUA for a couple of years, doing jazz Chicago style, 6 years after that on WDCB doing all Chicago jazz, and did a run at WNUR because I'd been off the air for 10 years and decided I better get back on the bike and keep riding. And I need to be around music. And it took me a while to get to work here. I've been here 4.5 years now. And getting around to what we're doing tonight, I work most of the week. I'm in the returns department. We offer a 60-day return policy and free shipping if there's a defect. So there are people who don't want to pay for shipping. So they make something up. And we have to go through every piece of gear that comes back and test it. And, you know, I've learned a ton while I've been here, but for me, the joy is being around music in any shape or form.
He's also our analog turntable setup expert here as well.
Taught by the great Bess Navarro.
Yeah, I just do it from time to time.
Now, we were talking about the One Step briefly. What do they resell for? This is the interesting part. You think $125 is a lot of money to pay for one album, but what is something like a Braxis or some of our...
300 to 350.
300 to 350
within a year
average.
after
Doubling,
that.
So
doubling
people are
their
buying them
investment.
as an investment, you know, and
I mean,
turning them
they're
as
only
well.
struck to so many printings. They're numbered. You know, it's a collectible cachet for the end user. They take a great deal of pride for those who actually open the copies and really put it through its torture test on a lot of very intense equipment. You know, the average consumer who plays it through their equipment's probably got about roughly between $12,000 to $50,000 worth of equipment, plus or minus cabling. He or she uses their discretionary income for everything from a good high-quality turntable with an estimated retail of about $2,000 plus cartridge. Our maximum package turntable right now is about $50,000 to $60,000 loaded to ship out to a customer, and it can be shipped most of the time with the needle installed, so that it gives that person the opportunity to just fire it up and get cracking. And,
Yet it can make no better sound than the sound of the master tape through a limited dynamic range LP.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
It is crazy from our perspective, yes.
Of course, and this is why I always have the deepest respect for you guys, because you're so focused on, you know, capturing every square iota of what needs to be captured. But imagine what I have to do in speaking to those individuals who are taking that very same disc or that very same recording that was EQ'd for vinyl or for CD or for streaming or whatever, and trying to explain to them, dude, it's in the master's hands, okay? I mean, you know, if you don't like it, then go send a letter to them. Don't come cracking to me on, you know, on issues like that.
I love LPs. I think the discussion is not for tonight, but I love LPs and I enjoy even ones which are not of the level which you guys are talking about technically. But when you make an LP out of your recording, you have to say, well, that's what the LP does, because it sounds nothing like what you had recorded.
Yeah.
And the fetishization, making the LP into a fetish item, which I'm also certainly guilty of, is a very interesting development now. We've gone from where the LP sounded better than the early CDs to now the LP is right back where it started as a enjoyable hands-on experience, which I think is at the heart of why people like it. And the sound is, of course, nice. But it sounds nothing like a recording. No, it absolutely not.
Well, just an experience, though.
Just to mention,
It sounds nothing like the recording.
Okay,
So-
we're going to limit the debate to 2 minutes with a 1 minute rebuttal.
No, I'm just saying.
So I should
I'm
keep-
not trying to turn that into it. What I am saying
I have the rebuttal.
is that there is a disconnect
Just
between purveyors of LP records with a high touch golden mastering and manufacturing chain and the reality of what there is when you make an LP.
Oh yeah, I don't think anybody gets that until it's actually put in their faces, and I understand that, and I also
Well, no one ever hears the master tape.
I understand. I'm trying to say that I respect your comments, and that's
So-
your point.
I've been here 4.5 years. I've got nice gear at home. I was pretty happy with it. I bought a pair of cables. I didn't buy anything. And, you know, I test gear. I won't mention the manufacturer. I had a power conditioner on my desk. I put on music I know intimately, and it compressed the hell out of it. I want to take a hammer to the thing. It just annoyed the heck out of me. So then I became familiar with Shunyata, and I asked one of our salesmen, Mark, I said, well, what's the deal with the Denali? And he said, it's life-changing. And I said, oh, really? And my brain's going, yeah, sure, pal. Yeah, right.
And Mark is not prone to hyperbole.
We got one returned, and it wound up on my desk. It was only the 2-outlet version. On my desk, I have an entry-level Marantz integrated amplifier and a CD player. So I had 2 outlets. I plugged it in. I put my headphones on. And about probably War's greatest hits, as I recall. 3-4 seconds later, my highest rating. Holy shit! I was stunned at the difference that it made. And I've become a great believer that power conditioning and interconnect cabling can greatly improve the sound of all your gear. And with that, I want to introduce Grant from Shunyata, who's going to take it from here.
Thanks, Dave.
all the way from Madison, Wisconsin.
From Madison, Wisconsin. I appreciate everybody taking the time and trouble to come out on a night like this. I've done one other event that was colder.
Jeez.
It was in Edmonton, and it was like beginning of March, and I caught a plane. I brought kind of like my medium windbreaker because it was 50 degrees in Madison, Wisconsin. And I figure, how cold could it be going, you know, it's a 2-hour plane ride, for Christ's sake. And I got there, and it, you know, there was a lot of snow on the ground, and the wind was whipping, but I figured, yeah, it can't be that bad. It was the worst cold I've ever felt in my life. And everybody was out. Schools were open, businesses were open, people were running around the street, kids were outside. And I turned to the distributor that picked me up. He said, how cold is it here right now? He goes, oh, it's minus 40, but that doesn't count the wind. So I had to, he had to go inside to get me a Coke just to get me inside the store. So that's my coldest ever story.
Edmonton.
Yeah, and this is about the same crew of hardcore people that showed up. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to come in. So I'm the marketing and sales director for two companies that are very closely related. They're sister companies. Same company, but you know, we split them into two for business reasons and tax purposes and things like that. One is Shunyata Research, and I better explain the name before I do anything else. And it's a vanity name. Our CEO's name is Kalen Gabriel. Kalen is a former National Security Agency scientist. He was the lead on a team that developed the military's low-level signal acquisition systems. So, spy gear. So his main job was to come up with ways that would reduce noise, that allowed them to pick up on signals that would otherwise be buried under random noise, radio signals. So Kalen was signals intelligence, I guess I'd say. He did that for 10 years. Left the military, like myself and the guys at Music Direct, had an abiding love of music. Went into the networking industry, was developing network architecture in the early days of the internet, and again, dealing with problems with noise and finding the tools with which to do that. He discovered in building his own music system unique ways to get rid of noise and make the sound better. This was 1997, 1998. So we're officially, this is our 20th year in business. It's a family-owned business. We operate out of a factory across the Puget Sound from Seattle, so up from Bainbridge Island. For the last 20 years, I've done the majority of the travel. As a means of introduction, I'd like to, my goal tonight is just to make sure everybody's aware of how important the electrical system is to sound. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with shielded power cords or fancy signal cables, interconnects, speaker cables. It has to do with just baseline electrical integrity within the system. And I'll give you some tips and tools that you can use that are not subtle at all in what they do. They cost almost nothing. Sometimes just a bit of your time, sometimes a bit of your electrician's time. And this will give you a window into what's possible. And then you can start exploring from there with these few simple tips. So there are two things that define us in the marketplace. One is science. In the last 20 years, Kalen has 14 patents, another 6 pending, tons of material innovations. We make our own outlets, we make our own conductors now. We have 3 cryogenic tanks, which we don't use much anymore because we found better methods for treating metals. So our infrastructure, in terms of measurement, in terms of applied science, in terms of manufacturing our own parts and materials, is enormous. And the reason we've been able to spend all that money is because you have to earn money to spend it. And in 1999, there were only 3 of us in the company. It was Kalen, his wife, and me. And then there was another person that came in to help build products, and we just evolved from there. In 2003, we got a review in Hi-Fi Plus magazine. And one of the principals for Pink Floyd's studio read the review, read the information about Kalen's background, contacted us. I flew out there, demonstrated the suite of products we had at the time. And the products were so successful in their application that they picked up the phone and called everybody they knew. But that just opens the door. So they called Skywalker Sound, they called James Guthrie, Alan Parsons, These are all people that have contacted me. These are all people that we've worked with or currently work with. Vlad O'Meller, who's a mastering guy for Sony Music, was another contact. Rick Rubin, who's a famous record producer. His mastering engineer, Eric Lynn, who works with Jackson Brown, a host of other musicians. Contacted us. Each time I got an opportunity, there was a great deal of skepticism, a great deal of, come on, this is nonsense. And they look at this. Now I travel in the medical industry too, because we in 2014 there was a former musician and current heart surgeon that has an electrophysiology lab in Minneapolis, Abbott Northwestern Heart Hospital. And he wondered what our products would do if he carried them into the lab, because they have endemic noise problems in electrophysiology and heart surgery. So he applied a system of our inexpensive products, got results he wasn't expecting, and of course, the same process occurred for us in professional audio, in medical. So
The patient lived?
yeah. So there are two fundamental things that that differentiate us, and I'm just going to touch on them briefly. One is the most important thing in any system that reproduces sound, and this has nothing to do with medical. In medical, it's 100% what's on that screen. What can the surgeon see? How can he see the architecture of the heart? So there's no current dynamics at all. There's no instantaneous pull of a current impulse from the wall. The electrical signal doesn't have to travel through junctions as if it's going through, it's attempting to attain the speed of light to get to the rectifiers. With sound systems, it's a much more delicate process. Anything that reproduces sound, anything that has an amplifier, even powered speakers, the ATCs that I run into all the time because of our English friends, they live and die by how freely they can pull instantaneous current. And if it's a highly compressed system, you can easily hear it as a loss in the timing and the weight and the fundamental architecture of a note. So the inception of a note might be highlighted, where you hear kind of a sharp edge at the beginning of the note, but you're missing the fundamental. You're missing the second order harmonic. You're missing the texture and color and tone of the note. And then the decay or the after note effect is truncated, and you don't hear the fall of the note after you've gotten through the fundamental. That all has to do with dynamic transient current delivery. And this is just kind of an introduction to Kalen and him describing what dynamic transient current delivery is, and there's a measurement that he's going to do that I'll
DTCD is an acronym, and it means dynamic transient current delivery. Current to electronics flows in pulses. It's not a continuous sine wave, as some people mistakenly believe, and it has to do with the way power supplies function. They pull that current in pulses or big gulps. We've done a lot of research to try to find out why would something that's seemingly as simple as power cord, which is essentially just wire and connectors in its simplest form, why would that affect the actual performance that you hear from an amplifier or from a preamplifier?
How they're affected is in the areas of timing and sound,
Distributed
the
inductance and
sharpness or
capacitance.
clarity that you can hear in sound.
The DTCD concept came from a measurement that's used in commercial electrical installations. To do this, all we have to do is plug it into the power line.
Uh-oh.
Went out.
You're back.
Okay, good. I won't touch that.
And then it gives us a variety of information. What we're primarily interested in is the dynamic current capability. It gives us the voltage, and it gives us the percent of distortion. And here
So this is the AACC tester that you described, normally used by commercial electricians to test the transient current capability of a line. They use that before they drywall to make sure that there aren't any big junction breaks or issues behind the wall that they need to fix. before they put the wall up. So it's a very common tool that's used, but it demonstrates, at least with numbers that you can see, what some of the issues are, because that's how electronics pull current. They pull current dynamically. If it's a sound reproduction system, there's dynamics of current going
Excuse
through.
me, I have a question before we go. What are the products so that we know?
Power
to put it
cords,
in context?
power cords, power conditioning, interconnects, speaker cables, digital cables.
Okay.
So cabling systems, electrical systems, and cabling systems.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is the ASCC test. It's telling us there's about 1.17 kiloamps of instantaneous current capability for this power line. And there can be many junction boxes and splices that occur throughout that wiring. So it's important to ensure that that wiring can handle a heavy electrical load. It has to meet the rating of whatever it's designated. So it may be a 15 amp, a 20 amp, or 30 amp circuit. Now, what I'd like to demonstrate is what happens when you take a simple commodity power cord, like the ones you get with your components, and let's see what it does to the dynamic transient capability just by inserting that power cord. Okay, I'm going to plug it in. And let's go down to ASCC. As you can see, the instantaneous current capability has dropped to 590 amps. Almost a 50% drop in the instantaneous current capability of that power line simply by plugging in one power cord. Now let's run the same test. Let's use a little better power cord. Let's use our least expensive power cord, the Venom 3.
The strength of a chain is strength of its weakest
That's $100. That's our least expensive power cord.
Now let's plug it into the circuit.
$100.
The cord is $700?
100.
Oh.
$95, I guess, music director.
And let's drop down to ASCC test. And you can see it reads 1.01 kiloamps. That's over 1,000 amps. So, by comparison, we only dropped 100 amps in instantaneous current capability by plugging in the Venom power cord. But with the commodity, the normal power cord, you've lost almost 50% of the instantaneous current capability.
And the reason we did that is because, look, most of the events I do, whether it's professional or audiophile events, the first question you get is, well, what does the last 6 feet matter when there's half a mile or a mile of wire behind the wall? How is that even relevant? Explain that to me, sir. You know, I got that little tone. And the reason is, stock power cords, if you're talking about dynamic draw electronics, which we are, if it's a sound reproduction system, draw those pulses of current. 120 times a second, the rectifiers are turning on and off. And that does two things. One, it's asking for current to be there instantaneously. Two, rectifiers and power supplies, and digital is worse, it's like a high-speed typewriter inside electronics. And there are harmonics, there are resonances that come off the rectifiers that are up to 50 times higher than the line frequency. And what all that means is that the electronic systems reproduce noise and throw noise back onto the line. And so we do two things. The problem with stock power cords, and nobody should use them. You don't have to buy a power cord for $95. Build your own. But make sure you do two things when you do that. The problem with stock power cords is the wire is just running up and it's sitting right up against the pins. There's no solder joint, there's no crimp, nothing's holding it there except the mold that goes around. So you've got this junction that this instantaneous current's trying to go through, and it's stutter stepping over it. Now, we could all pretend that, oh, you can't hear that, that's ridiculous, and that shouldn't matter. Well, hearing is believing. It really does matter. And people have been hearing it for 20 years. $5, build your own. But make sure you do two things when you do that. The problem with stock power cords is the wire is just running up and it's sitting right up against the pins. There's no solder joint, there's no crimp, nothing's holding it there except the mold that goes around. So you've got this junction that this instantaneous current's trying to go through, and it's stutter stepping over it. Now, we could all pretend that, oh, you can't hear that, that's ridiculous, and that shouldn't matter. Well, hearing is believing. It really does matter. And people have been hearing it for 20 years, but we've taken it a step further, and we wanted to understand why that was. So he took that ASCC tester, he hired a gentleman from Tektronix, and we built an analyzer that can show the rise time of a current impulse. So you can see it on paper, you can certainly hear it. Most people can. If it's a dedicated system, you can hear it. And all that's required is making this junction strong and this junction strong. I'll take it one step further. Probably the number one bit of information I give to people that generates the most callbacks are people that ask, okay, well, I've got an electrical system at home, and what can I do? What can I do to improve the, if electrical efficiency is that important, what can I do? Well, here's one of the first things I tell them is to get rid of this outlet, which is, I don't know, $3 from Home Depot. I'll walk around so everybody can see it. And buy this outlet. Now, this is our outlet. This is made from solid copper. It's stupidly expensive. I don't recommend anybody buy it. Well, we don't even sell it. It's not even on the market. It's just our cost is stupidly. It goes into our product. But there's one just like this. That's solid brass, high copper content, solid brass, about $25, $30. And the difference that you can hear between this, we've even had people start fires using this. Guys that have Class A biased amplifiers, you know, those amps that throw, you can feel heat coming off them. These will melt in some cases. So not only are they unsafe, but if you replace this with this, which costs $30, and you can't hear the difference, well, you know, there's something else wrong with your system.
Silver-plated copper?
No, this is, it's a very, very thin nickel plate to protect the copper from oxidation.
Yeah.
So the copper doesn't oxidize.
Yeah.
But, you know, we didn't spend, I don't know how many we had to have Hubble make to have it make sense price-wise, but it was in the thousands. And there's no reason we would invest this much money to build an outlet if it didn't make an enormous difference. There's this fellow. You can see it has 3 points of contact, massive metal points of contact. Or a toaster.
Actually, it wouldn't be.
But, you know, I mean,
Let's talk real.
Yeah, but isn't it true that every transmission line is actually a low-pass filter because it's got series inductance and shunt capacitance?
What we're trying to do is trying to eliminate each point of the impedance at each point of contact, at each junction in the chain, leading up to, and you can do this test at home just at your panel, not you personally, but hopefully an electrician. Next time you have an electrician out to do any work, if you've been at your place of residence or work for any length of time and you have a system that reproduces music there, have them go to the breaker that feeds the outlet that you're plugging everything into for your system. Make sure that the junction at that breaker is good and tight. It's maybe 1/8 of an inch turn. You know, it's just a tiny tweak, just to tighten that contact. Because when I tell people to do that, I get almost 100% callbacks with the guy that hair's on fire differences. It sounds more dynamic. I'm not hearing any noise anymore. My system was so noisy. It sounds louder. I don't have to turn the sound up as much. There's more dynamics coming from, I mean, they just go chapter and verse on me. And this cost them almost nothing to do. But if tweaking this tiny point of contact electrically, 30, 60, however many feet from your system makes that level of difference, that explains the importance of dynamic current in terms of the capability that a system has. The other thing that defines this in terms of the science, and I'll demonstrate this for you live, is that most power conditioning systems that exist in the medical field, that exist in recording, I ran into them at James Guthrie's studio, I ran into them at David Gilmour's. Everywhere I've been, Rick Rubin's, they all, transformers, and they don't understand why they've either got a hum. Skywalker, same thing. They had a hum, they had buzz. They don't know what the problem is. In these labs I visit, they've got endemic noise problems in the labs, and they don't understand why the transformers aren't getting rid of it. And I explained to them that transformers, and there are many permutations of transformers. There's regenerators, chokes, coils. We don't do any of that because they're acting as a two-way brick wall for noise. They're blocking noise from getting in from at the outside grid, but they're also blocking an exit path for any noise generated by the system from getting out. So what we do is we build two-way filters into all the products that are filtering the noise primarily coming from the electronics coming back onto the line. As I mentioned earlier, the bridge rectifiers throw a lot of noise. Digital architecture and electronics throws a lot of noise. So we build these two-way filter systems that are passed through that don't affect current into the products. And now we build them into the power cords as well. There is a complex multi-stage filter built into the head shell of this power cord. We do that because if you plug this into a component that either is extremely noise sensitive or a component that generates and pushes back noise onto the line, this is the first line of defense right here. These are all hand built. This is $300 this is a medical grade cord that we sell within the medical community now, and I get a lot of pushback from surgeons and biomedical teams and engineers that think that this is all a lot of nonsense. And I do a demonstration.
Not their field.
I do a demonstration to kind of win us the opportunity to apply the system, and then once they allow me in to apply the full system, then I know I have them, because I know what's going to happen. 100% of the time, I know what these products do in the field. I've been doing this for 20 years. But to get people's their disbelief, to suspend their disbelief requires a lot of work to get there. So this is a demonstration I'd like to do. This is a little noise detector. You plug this into the AC line. This little knob right here it's just like a gain setting. You just turn it up so you can hear the noise. There's a little speaker on the back. The noise is amplified so you can hear what noise is picked up on the AC line. It's inexpensive. It's certainly not high tech, but it is easy to carry. So I can throw it in my bag, and it's a lot less expensive and a lot easier to carry than these Fluke power analyzers that I used to carry around with me, which required a separate case and weigh about 100 pounds, and that was a real pain. So I'd like to do this demonstration for you just so you can understand from a baseline perspective what the products do. There's also, all of these cords are also shielded because you want to shield the conductors when you're in a noisy system where there's a lot of proximal noise from electronics. You want this entry point to be shielded. Don't think of a power cord as the last 6 feet of 100 miles of wire. Think of it as the first 6 feet from the perspective of the electronics. And it's actually an extension of the primary winding in a power supply, not the last piece of the electrical line. So if you wouldn't mind crowding in here, I've got an outlet here. I can plug this. we go. So this is about 100. You can hear it. Would somebody mind holding this? Rob, would you hold this? So what I'm going to do now
Understand.
is,
What about the 60 hertz?
no, this is picking up different frequencies of noise. It's a fairly narrow band of noise. The filter systems and certainly in the power conditioning that we build have much more complex filter systems.
Right,
that
but
filter
if
way beyond what
this
this
is
measures.
monitoring the noise. The 60 hertz is the major noise
Right.
that's in the AC.
Right.
It's not, you can't even call it noise. It's part of
It
what
goes,
it's all about.
it goes way up in frequency beyond 60 cycles.
So, I'm
There's in
asking,
fact, I can,
this is a monitoring device.
yes.
Why is it not monitoring the 60 hertz?
Well, because this is a very simple, it's a fairly narrow bandwidth noise detection
Can't hear the
device.
60 hertz from that speaker either.
Yeah.
I have a dumb question, I know, but I'll ask it anyway, because
Sure.
you said so much. The power cable is coax, right? It's a coaxial cable?
The power cable is just
Or
three
twin.
conductors
twin link.
intertwined and going to the
Oh,
hot,
twisted.
neutral, and ground.
Oh, you don't need it for that, okay.
So I'm just going to plug this into the circuit. So this line obviously runs back to the panel. I'm going to first plug it into the circuit to see if it does anything to the noise just by becoming part of the AC line. So that's without connecting it to the device itself. And the reason the noise dropped, whatever it did, 80%, is because once this is connected to the line, of course, this is now part of the AC line going all the way back to the panel. It's now an integral part of the AC line. This lets me disconnect this.
Do you have capacitors in there?
There are very tiny multi-stage capacitors. If you measured the capacitance in here, it'd be almost nothing. He makes all his own caps. What he didn't like about capacitors is they ring, and he thought that they generated noise and we could measure it. So he made capacitors that don't ring and are very low in measured capacitance. You don't want too much capacitance on a line because then you end up interfering with the power supplies that the electronics manufacturers have built into their electronics. So if somebody uses heavy choke regulation in the power supply of the component and you're jamming a bunch of capacitors on that line, the component's not going to like that. It won't sound good. So I'll plug this in directly, and now you're down to, the minimum. It's funny. I'll turn this up, and before I could pick up a radio station. There it is. So I'm getting rid of enough noise that you can now hear the radio on the AC line. Of course, this is
That sounds like you.
this is
Picking
Max.
stuff up from the
This is Max game. So usually, the only reason I do this test really is to buy time, and so the medical teams give me access to their system, and that's where I can really win hearts and minds. And obviously, this is all contextual, regardless of what this does here. These have to be applied in real systems, in real studios, with your speakers, your amplifiers. You have to hear it. So we don't sell anything based on confidence. I always make sure that there is an evaluation opportunity. That's why Music Direct is such a great vendor for us, because it's a 60-day return policy. And you guys don't get a lot of returns with our...
No, I'm happy to say that our returns rate is pretty low, but we do go through a very evaluative process, much like what Grant is doing here today, to see what the end user is trying to do in his or her environment, whether or not they've done changes to their electrical system or home setups.
We have Mark Levinson preamp in the chain. The Mark Levinson, because they electronics, especially amplifiers, preamplifiers can, if they're highly class A biased, they have a strong magnetic field. And placing components right next to each other like that is another reason why using shielded power cords to protect from, to just eliminate one more ingress point for noise that's going to get into, because they radiate this electromagnetic field that surrounds them. There's RF. I could come in here with an RF meter and measure all kinds of nasty stuff behind the system. So we don't just look at it from an electrical, we take a holistic approach of how to get rid of noise in systems that are really highly calibrated. So let's play a track, and
The remote is actually the central player.
this is the esoteric.
Yeah, but they look the same. Go ahead and play if you want. There you go. He's smarter than me.
Yeah. So we're going to keep the volume the same. This is our phone. So it's at 53. Get out of the way.
Everybody talks about some fateful day. I guess that this was mine.
Just changing power cords.
Do all three components.
That's to improve transient response. Transient, actually. This is after the change of the power cords.
Everybody talks about some fateful day. I guess that this was mine. Maybe here to tell some kind of story, but I think it's gonna take a little time. See him rocking in a cradle down a hall somewhere, and I am lost inside a dream. Maybe I am falling, maybe I am flying, but I know if I am crying, she's holding me. And then the sky, and then the rain came down, and it washed away everything on the ground. Wash it away, wash it away, wash it away.
As a demonstration, is that anytime you affect an electrical change and you shut off electronics and you turn them back on, that's not an ideal demonstration because you're changing so many variables and parameters, so especially the digital on and off. The ideal would be, if you're making an electrical change at home, make the electrical change, get used to whatever that is that you've changed, and then go back. So if it's a power cord, for example, don't do these quick. Okay, I'm going to listen to 15 seconds of that and 25 seconds of this. Just leave it and wait till you've almost forgotten that it's there, and then go back to the stock cord. Or, same with a power conditioner. You never do these quick because you're not even sure what you're hearing. But we all know, because we all listen to a lot of music, and I sit and listen for an hour or two sometimes. Over time, the difference is you can't escape it. It's there. So the quick ins and outs there. I mean, I do this all the time in shows. I mean, it's what we do. I do it at studios too. But if it's something for yourself, and use heavier gauge than the junk wire. Recordings he was remastering at the time, but he also the executives from Sony Music came to. It was a big marketing event, and they came down to his studio, and he gave away our power cords to the guys from Japan. And he called me to say, because I'd loaned them to him initially. I just said, here, you can borrow them. He hadn't paid for them, and he gave them away. And I was upset with him. I stole their samples.
Of course, and I'm choosing the end point.
Right. Yeah. Amplification, you know, it's kind of a horse race between the two, and it really depends on the individual system. But in most cases, I choose amplification first because it pulls hardest on the line, so it's the most stressed component in the chain because of the dynamic way it pulls current. And then because it's pulling so hard, it's also pushing back a lot of noise back into the chain. So I usually go with amplifier, but if it's a digital front end, digital electronics are so fussy and they dump so much noise that you really can't go wrong either way. And you just bring one in at a time, but if somebody's asking, I usually go with amplification over source.
I see.
Especially bass. That draws a lot of juice.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, the 1812, or I mean, the amount
2112
of current that's, and I have guys that have contacted us. They're upset because they for years there's these guys out there that they just want it simple, right? So they want to turn on the whole system with their big toe. They don't want to have to go on and turn on the individual electronics. They just want it all to come up at once. And these guys decided to replace their power cords, so they put all our power cords in the system, right? And then he went and he, like,
Rock, classical, black culture. Marvin Gaye, Duke Ellington, Woody Blues, Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. Hot Springs. Yeah, Supertramp. Wow. They got the albums, don't they? Got some nifty turntables, too. 1999. 400, 150 project. 1500. I think I'm going to keep my turntables. And I think I'm going to have something to eat. Power amp. Look at those cooling fins. Aluminum cooling fins. Of course, power cords are important. Power cord is a series resistor. When there's a big passage in a symphony orchestra or bass line in a rock song, there's a big rush of current. The more current that flows through the power line, the more voltage drop across the power line by Ohm's law, which causes a drop in the supply voltage to the power amp, which of course is going to cause a slight deregulation in the power supply, which of course is going to cause a supply voltage on your DC, on your power amp to call down, which of course will create, among other things, harmonic distortion. But your audio is just not going to have the punch. So yes, these things are extremely important. What else we've got here? More turntables. Belt drive analog turntable. More amps. Billy Joel, greatest hits. So essentially, should I keep my turntables, my Techniques turntable at home, and my Sony and the Gerard turntables. I should keep them because they're worth something.
It's not a question of if it's worth something. Yes, they are always worth something to somebody. It's the question of the condition of those turntables and whether or not they're operating. If they are, in fact, fully functional, there's no problems with the bearings or anything like that, and from time to time you still play music on it, congrats. Have fun. It's real simple. No harm, no foul.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So Hudson, are you doing your recording
Oh, yes, sure.
all the time?
I do every week some things. I seem to be stuck in a Mobius loop of choral music recording and brass quintet. That's what I've been working on. And yes, I'm doing a lot of good work. January is rather slow, but I've already done one big project, and I'm in the editing room finishing some stuff out. Yes, quite often. And everything's going good.
And I'm working in church. I'm doing the soundboard every Sunday. The acoustics of that church are really to be desired. It's a very pointy sanctuary.
Oh, like an A-frame or something?
Yeah.
Hey, great. You're bringing it to the people so they can feel sanctified.
Right.
Yes, excellent.
It's a Spirit S1000 soundboard. It's got like 14 sliders.
Oh, sure.
We got 2 microphones, a mic on the piano, a pulpit mic, and we got 2 speakers up on. So I woman the board.
Oh, sure. Yes, you're a woman the board. You're the woman.
Yeah, it's a fun job, but I wish there was a little bit of.
Ask for a raise. So I've been doing it a while, and things are getting more expensive everywhere. Yeah, that's her. You're the woman. They say, I need to be made. I need to feel like I'm family.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
Every church cries poor, but really they have a lot of money, I would say. They're hiding it.
So did you ever do a soundboard in the church?
No, I never have. I am not a good, I'm not really that knowledgeable about sound reinforcement. I have done some, but I'm mostly a recording person. And it's a little bit of a different art. I could select some good microphones to use and all in sound reinforcement, but I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know, like, I'm not an expert at all with monitors. So I would have a lot to learn in that.
That wasn't 10 years ago.
Recording.
That was 10 years ago. You did that in 10 years?
Way back in the 70s, we used to and play in the car because of preserve the life of the I used to do that with my dad.
Oh, yeah.
We used to make 8mm movies, splice them together at the time.
Oh, great, yes. Sure, all handmade.
Yeah.
It meant something. It was cool. It was a good project. For sure. For sure, it's a good
Look at the
project.
cooling fins on this.
Yeah, it's intense.
That must be an analog thing.
Oh yeah, that thing's vintage.
That's some big MOSFETs on there.
Probably.
Maybe some bipolar transistors or something.
Right. I bet so. Yeah, they're really.
So are you going to go back to it again?
Where's this Marvin Gaye thing going to be?
I heard you said it was magnetically connected, so it's not.
No, that's the VPI. That's magnetically connected.
No, this is a belt. This is a belt-driven turntable.
Belt governs
And-
the rim drive,
Yeah.
which governs the player.
Right.
And dealt with their child. Yes.
That's correct.
So it's not physically connected at all.
By the way, the phono stage that you heard the Marvin Gaye on down on the bottom, It's made by a gentleman out of Kansas City. His name is Ron Sutherland. He is also best known as one of the co-partners behind the original Logan Hubs program. So, you know, electrostatic loudspeakers.
Marvin Gaye, what's going on?
That's one of the guys behind it.
Great album.
And I do mean to interrupt because we have like 12. Some of you, it's software based.
Here's a quad 2 preamp.
Yeah, it's a really big thing.
You should check that out.
This thing called TIM.
It's an incredibly great sound. It's the only way to raise it.
Macintosh headphone amplifier. I have my eyes on this.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm glad I could help you.
What we got here? Beatles. Simple Minds. Don't you forget about me. Don't you forget about me. Bill Haley in the comments. I could actually live here. Duke Ellington and John Coltrane. Here you go, from the meeting. Sandwiches. Here, Katarina. Here, enjoy. And your Diet Coke. This concludes our Tuesday, January 29, 2019 meeting of the Engineering and Recording Society. If you like this video, please click the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe down below. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching.